At 6 o'clock, I will convene the regular meeting of the Union County Board of Commissioners for Monday, June the 20th, 2022. And tonight I have the invocation. And this is one I've used before, and it was heavy on my heart over the weekend. I'll read a little scripture from Chronicles, 2 Chronicles 7 through 14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear them from heaven, and I will forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now, if you would like to and choose to, bow your heads. Our dear Heavenly Father, I come to you tonight, a sinner saved by grace. I humbly ask for you to protect and heal our land. My prayer tonight is to ask you, dear God, to give us the strength for all people to turn away from all of the wickedness that is so present in our world today. I know by your own promise that if we call on you, you will hear us in heaven. Forgive us of all our sins, and I claim in your words to heal this land. Empower us as leaders and citizens to live a Christian and God-fearing lifestyle, and let everyone see in how we live that we are following your words to make this a world that is God-loving and God-fearing. Please protect our law enforcement, fire, EMS, and all other governmental employees that work to make this great nation what it is, and leave no doubt that you are on the throne and in full control of our world. Amen. Now, if you would stand, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's good to see Commissioner Rushing back tonight. He's walking a little weak-legged, but he's here, and glad to see you hopefully on the mend. All right, we have nobody signed up for informal comments, so we'll go to a public hearing. Item 22-383 is an opportunity for hearing by Helms, Bennett, practicing attorneys at law regarding a request for a refund of overpayment of excise taxes paid to the Register of Deeds office. Is anyone present from Helms, Bennett, PA, that would like to speak? Consideration of this request is from 22-395 on the consent agenda. Okay, with nobody being present, I will close the public hearing. All right, now moving on to staff recognition, June retirements, and service awards recognition. Jacqueline Ramos, Health Department, 5 years. Janet Payne, Human Services Business Ops, 5 years. Lilith Frenner Smith, Parks and Recreation, 5 years. Christopher Mumpower, Public Communications, 5 years. William Hackney, Sheriff's Office, 5 years. David Hatley, Sheriff's Office, 5 years. Jason Rand, Sheriff's Office, 5 years. Octavius Rory, Veteran Services, 5 years. Alberta Allegayan, Social Services, 10 years. Maria Neves, Social Service, 10 years. Amy Myers, Tax Administration, 10 years. Sandra Shaw, Sheriff's Office, 15 years. Lisa Gutierrez, Social Services, 15 years. Angela Carver, Sheriff's Office, 20 years. Donald Honeycutt, Public Works, 25 years. Bradley Hayams, Tax Administration, 25 years. And then for June retirements, Angela Carver, Sheriff's Office, 20 years. And Cindy Orr, Real Property Appraisal, 21 years. Let's give all these folks a hand. All you 5 years, you were all here before I came on the board, so some of you people that I see at 5 years really surprises me, because you know, if you're here when somebody else comes, that person that comes assumes you've been here forever. So I remember I used to think that about teachers. All right. Liz Cooper's not here tonight. You gonna do it for Mr. Manager?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we're going to recognize a couple of Caught in the Act award recipients. The first, I'm going to ask Mr. Charles Gabb if he would come join me up at the podium. Charles, how are you doing this evening? Good to see you. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this is Water Instrumentation and Control Technician Charles Gabb. He's being recognized for rushing to help a crash victim before first responders arrived. Charles was working on an issue at a lift station at the Water Operations Center when he heard what sounded like a car crash on Gold Mine Road. Charles drove over and found a single car accident, and after calling 911, he helped the driver out of the car and provided first aid for a head wound until he was relieved by first responders. Charles is a veteran, and while serving as an Army Ranger for 12 years, he received combat life-saving training, which helped him provide that service to the crash victim. So, Charles, thank you so much for all that you do. Now, Mr. Chairman, do you have something you would like to present to Charles? We have right up here.
I do.
All right, Charles, if you just come right over here.
And that Ranger, I had a nephew try out for it, and his knee blew out, so as a mess of you, I know you could. That Ranger's training's no joke. Thank you for all you do. Yep.
I believe we have Charles's supervisor and some co-workers here. And is this your wife with you this evening? Yes. We appreciate Charles and everything he does. Awesome. Now, that was for the Caught in the Act for winter of 2021. And we have for the spring of 2020, we have another Caught in the Act recipient, Miss Mindy Huey. And Mindy, if you would please come up. How are you this evening?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Mindy is a behavioral health therapist. She's being recognized for coordinating donations for a family who recently moved to Union County from Ukraine as refugees. Over multiple days, Mindy coordinating picking up and dropping off donations and gathering other resources to assist this family of four that had 2 children who had fled the war in Ukraine. Mindy, thank you for caring about others, and thank you for representing Union County the way you do. Absolutely. We appreciate you. Let's step right around here. Mr. Chairman.
very nice to meet you, Mindy. Helping people in need is one of the best things anybody can do, and that's what I've seen in social services. And so we're proud to present this award to you.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we have Mindy's supervisor with us this evening. And just a note, Mindy is part of the behavioral health collaborative that we have with the Union County Public Schools. So again, Mindy, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we come now to the consent agenda. Need a motion. Got a motion? All in favor? Aye. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Well, I saw that, and it was a little confusing. We're going to have add the item for closed session at the end of the regular meeting. So, Mr. Long, when we won't adjourn in here, we will.
You will read the motion to go into closed session and we'll go.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. We'll go to business. John Shutat or Brian Matthews.
Normally, this is just an information-only item, but I thought it was important to point some things out to the board and to the public, so this is very transparent about our operations for the county. Some time ago, the board is aware, we had reached a point where capacity was getting limited in our 12 Mile Creek wastewater treatment plant. And the board placed a cap for us issuing a new permits at the time of 95%. And then as the weather got better, the board removed that cap and gave staff the ability to manage permitting over time to allow additional projects to move forward. What we have here at this point in time is the treatment facility at 12 Mile has reached a point where it essentially is at 99% again. And that's because we've gained all the capacity we're going to gain from that rolling average where the weather was really wet in 20 and 21 and it's been much drier this year. So we've gained about all the capacity we're going to gain in that treatment facility of any major amount. We will get some small amounts over the next few months, maybe a year or so, as permitted projects turn to actual flows. Permitted amounts are usually higher than the actual amount, so you gain a little bit of capacity that way, but it won't be significant numbers. So I'm here to report to you so you're aware, we will, for the foreseeable future, we will not be issuing permits for projects to move forward in the 12 Mile Creek Basin. We're at or above 99%. The next project would actually push it to almost 100%, and we feel that we need at least some buffer before we do that. So I'm just letting you know, for the time being, we will be stopping any permitting of that. If we do gain some additional flow from actuals to permitted to actuals, we will certainly still allow projects to move forward, but we try to keep it that 99% range to have some buffer in there. Crooked Creek is still permitting. It is not at capacity. So that is still moving forward, but I did want the board to be aware that that's where we stand with 12 Mile Creek. As you know, we're going through engineering design for an expansion for 12 Mile Creek from 7.5 to 9 million gallons. That work is being done now. We hope to have a contract, hopefully, for construction in the near future, and then the board will have to take action on that. So I can answer any questions you might have about that.
Any questions? Okay.
If not, I do want to recognize, it was on your agenda for information only, but I think it's important that we also point out some of the things that we deal with on the water side. We've talked about sewer. It's good to talk about the water side. So we're going to also give you a monthly report on water, but for the very first one, Hyung is going to give you an update on where we stand with our water capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of the board. So yes, this was included as an information item. We thought it would be a good pairing with the sewer capacity information that was being shared with you. But since this is the first one, we thought it would make sense to just talk about it briefly with the board, and also in this setting, talk about it with the public so that they'll understand what they're seeing if they ever see these charts as well. So my purpose really, I'm not asking for any action, just give you a status update on where we stand with water demand right now. And this is for information only. We're not requesting any action, and we will provide this on a monthly basis at the same time that we provide the sewer information. So in your information packet, there are 2 charts attached. The first chart shows you water use data over the last 13 months. So it goes from May 1, 2021 through May 31, 2022. And I recognize we're in the month of June, but we had to get the agenda item into the packet, and it takes time to put all this stuff together. So we're going through 5/31/2022. So let me start with the 2 red lines. So the lower of the red line is what we would consider our regular use capacity. Our capacity is 23 MGD, 20 of it from the Catawba Water Plant, and 3 from Anson. So 20 plus 3 equals 23 is our regular use capacity. In addition, we have a lease with Lancaster Water and Sewer for an additional 3 MGD should we need it. I would consider that an emergency water supply, so if we ever go above 20, we would draw on that first. Excuse me. So 23 plus 3 emergency gets you to a total of 26 MGD of water that we have available on any given day for our use. The blue line that you are seeing is the demand, and we track it on a daily basis. So what you're seeing are the fluctuations day by day as far as demand goes. And you can also, since it covers 13 months, you can also see some of the seasonality to it. In the winter months, the demand is lower. No one's irrigating in the winter. And in the summer months, obviously, demand is higher. And you can see the peak right here was 6/1. And you can see it going forward, well, this is 5/1, this would make it May 31. So we're really close to the peak from last year. And so that's what's happening. Demand is, for water use over the summer months is going up. And it's part of it is seasonality. Part of it is tied to the weather. We were fortunate the last couple of days have been kind of cool over the weekend. Got some rains in the mornings and in the evening, some of it expected, some of it heavier than we would want. We'd want it to be like a light sprinkle spread out over several hours versus a torrential downpour in 30 minutes. But we'll take what we can get, because that's sort of where we are. So you can see we're close to our regular use capacity, both in 2021 and also at the end of this fiscal year, this May 31 of this year, but we're under the red line. And so that's what we're sharing with you right now. Chart 2, this gives you a little bit more detail on the last 30 days. So we're really just looking at demand over May 1 through May 31 of this year, 2022. You're also going to see a couple other things. First, you'll see the same 2 lines. In this case, the regular capacity line is dotted, and then the emergency capacity is a solid line. So you'll see those 2 things. You're seeing the data points by day for the 31 days in the month of May. The other thing that you are seeing in this chart is we threw on, since we had a little bit more space, rainfall data. So the gray bars shows you by day how much rain that we've gotten, and this is how much rain is captured by our rain gauges. This doesn't necessarily mean that rain fell evenly across the county and across our entire service area. It's just what our rain gauges caught and what the data has. So you can see obviously when it rains, our usage is down, and where it's dry and there is no rain, it tends to obviously tends to be higher because people are using more water for a variety of activities that they need, whether it's, beyond inside the house, for irrigation, for washing their cars, or whatever else that they're doing. So, again, there are points in time in the month of May where we are close to our regular capacity of 23 MGD, but we're still under it. And that's all we wanted to show you in terms of water demand data over the last 30 days and the last 13 months. And that was it. That's all. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hyung, the up to 3 million gallons a day that we can get from Anson, historically, has that been anything approaching consistent in terms of delivery of that water?
Well, I would tell you that we have reliability issues with that water source.
Okay. And the current capacity at the Catawba facility is what, 40 million?
40 MGD.
40 MGD. And that's split evenly between us and Lancaster?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the 3 million gallons a day that we do occasionally lease from Lancaster, they're not obliged to give that to us, right?
We did sign a contract for that lease of 3 for the next
I mean, at a certain price, right? But
Yes.
Are they obliged to give us anything other than, half of the capacity from that facility?
No, sir. They actually, to your point, I think, it's, based on their goodwill. It's a
Right,
goodwill
exactly.
gesture.
They're being nice to us. That
Yes,
was
exactly
okay.
right.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of information for the board. After reviewing this information with staff the other day, I reached out to the current Anson County interim manager, and as a result, he has noted our concerns. He has some concerns of his own also regarding the production of water through that system. But we have a meeting set up, he, myself, and a couple of staff members on Monday morning, this coming Monday morning, next week to discuss that issue of reliability. And as I have made individual members of the board aware, I have directed staff to contact Charlotte Water and to explore turning on our interconnects at the 880 zone, which the 880 zone typically uses on a normal day between 3 and 3.5 million gallons a day. That interconnect was installed as a stopgap emergency measure during the summer months, specifically for this purpose when we start bumping up against our capacity to produce our own water. Provides us with a cushion, if you will. We have not heard back from Charlotte Water as to whether or not they agree that they can provide that at this point. We have made several telephone calls and continue to follow up with them in the morning. So more to come on that.
Do we have any contractually guaranteed water amount from them?
We do not.
Okay. Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you. Should we be implementing some of our stages in our water conservation measures?
That is up to the board and the manager. We can present the information to you, and based on the data, you can decide, so choose. I'll say the water use ordinance is written with the flexibility pretty much to allow you to do whatever it is you decide is appropriate.
Mr. Rushing, after reviewing the information provided by staff the other day, I would like to get these interconnects turned on and have this additional supply of water from Charlotte before we even talk about going through any kind of stages of restricted water use in Union County. It's not a, this is not a drought condition situation. This is a limitation on how much water we can produce versus how much is being used.
So, but one way or the other, if it's not serious enough to implement?
As we sit here tonight, that could
Okay.
change with the weather before your next meeting, but as we sit here tonight, that's where we're at.
Well, would you like the flexibility to make that decision in case something happens between now and then?
I would certainly consult with board before making that decision. The ordinance provides that the county manager can make the decision on stage one, but I would not take that measure before consulting with each one of you first. When it goes beyond stage one, then I believe it takes a board action, if I'm not mistaken, to do that. So, and there are some other items that need to happen, but I think we're good where we're at today. Believe you me, I'll be in touch with y'all along the way as we move forward in this process.
Mark, did you tell me last week if we go to the next stage, rates will go up?
That's stage two. That's stage
Okay.
two. And there are more restrictive water uses and rate changes and things like that, and it escalates from there. We're nowhere close to that right now, so we'll take it day by day, week by week. But I want to take every measure possible to ensure that we don't reach that and have to make those decisions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Brian?
Yes.
Yes, yes, sir. I do want to point out that the manager actually did ask us to actually reach out to our customers and get them to voluntarily conserve. So obviously, this isn't mandatory, but we are going to communicate with our customers, ask them to voluntarily conserve, make every efforts so that we can weather any weather conditions we might have as far as our water needs. So I did want to point out that the manager actually did direct us to take that step, and that's not mandatory. So I wanted to point that out.
Boy, Brian, I appreciate you catching that one, Brian. As I have informed each of you, I think it is incumbent upon Union County as a water provider to encourage conservation of a very valuable and important resource, especially during this time of the year. And I would think that we would not have done our job or done it well if we reach a conservation measure, stage one, stage two, or above that, if we hadn't started talking to folks about being good stewards of our natural resource. So it is just friendly reminders at this point, trying to get people bring it back to their frame of mind that it is an important resource. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, we go to, is Josh Brooks here? Andy, you want to introduce him and let him?
Yes, Chairman. Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners, County Manager. Andy Knapp for the record, Water and Wastewater Division Director. Josh Brooks is the Assistant Director. He'll actually be presenting to you once I introduce the subject matter to you this evening. What we're here to talk about is the cross-connection control program and ordinance that's needed, and then also the industrial pretreatment program and the sewer use ordinance updates that are needed. We already have a sewer use ordinance in place. This is really an update for it. It hasn't been changed since the 1990s in any substantial way. So it's far outdated and needs to be brought up to standards, particularly with state standards, with new requirements for monitoring industries that discharge wastewater into our system. This program is involved with tracking and monitoring fats, oils, and greases that's introduced to the wastewater collection system. And then also with any industries that discharge any kind of substance to the plants that can cause any upset in the plant process. So it's vitally important that we protect the plants, protect the wastewater collection system and the environment. With regard to the cross-section control program, that's a new program that we're asking you to consider. It's very important. Both of these programs are regulatorily driven. With the cross-section control program, that program essentially monitors and controls discharges or backflows from companies or any kind of residential community that may have irrigation systems back into the water system as a whole. So it's really intended to protect the water system and protect our customers. There have been a number of issues around the country with problems with cross-connection control. Most notably, there was a situation a few years ago in Corpus Christi, Texas, and this is kind of a landmark issue for utilities. In December of 2016, there were a few complaints lodged with the water department in Corpus Christi, Texas. They were struggling to figure out what was going on. People thought the water looked funny. They thought it smelled funny. It wasn't right. The utility was getting some complaints. The utility was trying to track down what was going on. Simultaneously, this asphalt plant in Corpus Christi, the employees there noticed in their sinks like a sheen on the water. It smelled funny, looked funny. It wasn't right. So this quest began to what is going on with the water supply in this facility? And it turned out that it was an asphalt emulsion that was introduced into the water system. They had a backflow device in the facility, but it didn't work. It failed to operate properly. So this emulsifier entered into the water system, and I also read where there was also hydrochloric acid that was also introduced through the same facility into the water system. Backflow preventer failed, wasn't monitored, wasn't controlled, and this backflowed into the Corpus Christi system. So what happened as a result of that? The city of 320,000 people posted a do not use the water. This is not boil water. You can't boil this away. Boiling is for pathogens that go into the water. We do that with our main breaks in case any of the dirt has any bacteria that may go into the water system to protect people. But this was a do not use. You couldn't shower with it. You couldn't drink it, of course. Couldn't wash with it. Couldn't use it in your washing machine. It was like, do not use this water. And this happened over a 4-day period. Eventually, they fixed the backflow device, and then they flushed the water system in the city to the extent that this disappeared, this went away. And then the city was allowed to return to normal. But it was a major event for that particular city in Texas. And it's not just frankly, it's not just a regulatory thing. I mean, you can imagine the impact on a community with such an event where, you've got the reputation of the water system. A business may want to come to that area and then go, wait, I'm not so sure about your water. There's also potential litigation. So it's not just a regulatory driver. There's these other issues that blend into proper protection of the water system. So tonight you'll hear about 2 ordinances. We have the cross-connection control program stood up to the extent that it's non-mandatory, and tonight what we're asking for is to make that program a mandatory program with some penalties if people do not comply, and that's a major component of it. But this is not a heavy-handed issue. This is, we knock on the door first, we talk to the people, we try to get them to do the right thing. But if they don't do the right thing, then we have the tools we need to compel compliance and protect the water system. So Josh Brooks will be presenting to you this evening. Josh is the assistant director, as I mentioned, and Josh has been with the county since March of 1999. And in his tenure with the county, he's seen many improvements to the utility systems. He holds a grade 4 wastewater collection certification. He holds a distribution C certification for the water system. and he holds a Grade 1 biological certification at the plants. He has also been recognized by the industry for achievement over the course of his tenure. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Josh to start talking to you about the cross-connection control program. And I want to point out that this evening, this is just a presentation. We're not asking for any action at this point. This is to introduce you to the subject matter. Your agenda package has a lot of background material, including the ordinance that we're asking you to consider next time on July 11th. And a copy of this presentation is also in your agenda packet. So we'll answer your questions this evening, and if you have additional thoughts, because like most people, I'll think about something later and I'll go, wait a minute, tell me about this again. We're open to all your questions over time as we approach July 11th to present the ordinances to you for consideration. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh.
Good evening. Chairman Rape, Commissioners, members of the board, Manager Watson, thanks for the time to be here tonight to talk about these programs. Thanks, Andy, for the introduction. So these are two very important programs for UC Water as it goes to protecting health and protecting the health of the system itself. In the cross-connection program, we'll go over a few of the things in this presentation this evening. Reviewing what Andy said, what is cross-connection, some of the requirements, an overview of what we're looking at as far as the system, overview of the program, elements of that, and what's next moving forward. So as Andy described in the introduction, cross-connection and backflow go hand in hand. Here is a couple of pictures of what that looks like. As a cross-connection, it's an introduction as pollutant into the water system. Combined with the backflow event, which is system pressure loss, you can pull those pollutants like out this wash sink into the system and cause a cross-connection backflow event. A couple of examples to go along with what Andy was also saying. There's a few contamination events that upon research, you can get some details on these. The first one actually, unfortunately, introduced 12 fatalities in a state veterans home because of lack of safeguards into the system as it got contaminated. And then the second one was also a contamination event from a cross-connection where a contractor hooked to a hydrant unauthorized without a backflow device, pulling hydro-seed material into the system. And once the backflow event occurred where the system pressure loss, causing traumatic sickness in the system. So why are we looking at doing this? It's basically for protection. It's to protect the public water supply, it's to protect our customers, produce consumer confidence, as well as it's required for commercial and non-residential connections to have protection to the water system. And we have legal requirements. As most things with water and wastewater, we are regulatory driven. So based on these requirements, we have the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act that produced the EPA rules, the primary drinking regulations, and in turn produced the state which issues our water system permit, also providing regulations for us to follow when it comes to cross-connection and backflow. As well as a state plumbing code that introduces instructions and guidelines when it comes to building these components. So in the water system, we have over 59,000 metered connections. Under this program, there's various components to this to where it requires those with irrigation systems to fall under this program under these regulations. It includes irrigation systems that are separate metered than the domestic use. Also the ones that are domestic and irrigation meters in 1 meter, which is pre-2009 of a new state statute that came out, as well as meters larger than 1 inch in diameter, which are typically commercial and non-residential. What's going to happen when we move forward with this program upon adoption is we're going to have to do a complete full survey to understand what that exposure is going to look like and how we can manage it under this program. So the current status is it's not mandatory, it's not enforceable at this point. We're doing all we can to have companies and owners report these devices with testing and approved and certified testers, so we can actually provide a list of certified testers to the public so that they don't have to hunt around and search around. These are testers that have been certified through cross-connection control school programs and certified under our orientation of this program to understand what the county's needs are. This program is mirrored and very similar to other programs with other municipalities. Here in the slide, you see the cities of Raleigh, Harrisburg, Concord, and Charlotte Water have some of these similar programs. However, the difference with their program and ours is theirs is enforceable. They've adopted it under an ordinance, and they can enforce what's under their programs. So a few elements to the ordinance as we talk about updates. We'll go from program responsibilities through how to certify testers, what it requires to enforcement, and any fees that may be there to recover just the program cost of a cross-connection control program. So in the responsibilities, the county's responsibility is to administer this program through education, training, and certifying testers, and enforcing the program for anyone that's in noncompliance. The customer's requirement, their responsibility will be to install and have a certified tester test their own device, which that is under no control of Union County to get any of that funding from this. All we do is certify the testers, provide a list, they go through the list, pick the tester that best suits their needs, and produces the results of the test. And again, this applies to residential customers with irrigation systems and commercial non-residential industrial accounts. It goes into defining hazard classes. So a hazard class is basically how you define the danger in the water system when it comes to pollutants. Between a high hazard and low hazard is how it's classified, with the high hazard being potential or probable to result in a health risk, where a low hazard is more of a nuisance or is aesthetically unpleasing, such as like discoloration or taste and odor, that doesn't result in any kind of health hazard. So we referred to device testing earlier. So devices must be tested after any repairs, modifications, and annually thereafter. Any failure to test and submit those results will be deemed as a high hazard premise because we don't understand what's on the other side or what that device can do if there was an issue to arise. And in order to protect the system, this also allows UC Water to disconnect the service if further testing proves that it's not functional and they're not providing any effort to get that device operational.
Josh,
Yes, sir.
a couple of questions here. So this is, if we do this, we're going to be requiring all irrigation, homes with irrigation meters only to get this test done yearly.
That's correct. It's homes with irrigations that are metered either separately from the domestic meter or metered in combination to their domestic meter. That's correct.
Do we know how many that is right now?
We need to do that complete survey as I mentioned earlier. We have an idea what that looks like, but without having some concrete numbers, I'd hate to put that out there at this moment.
I understand that when the system goes off, it can back drain down to the check valve, cross flow valve, so.
Mhm. That's correct.
This is gonna create a lively discussion.
Yes, sir. Will, to follow up on your point, if that device is not operational, it's not fully functional the way that it's intended to be, whatever that cross-connect is, if it exists, pulls that into the water system, and then it immediately gets dispersed. It's easier to handle it at the one point than it is once it gets out into the system and we have to track it down. So to further discuss testing, in order for a certified tester to be certified through UC Water, they have to have a current tester certification that's issued through a cross-connection control school. A lot of that's offered through American Water Works Association. It can be done through NC Rural Water at this point. There's also other municipalities that offer the training that follows every criteria for that, and they can certify testers as well, and they can carry that certification to other areas. Once they get that, they can come to Union County, sit through the orientation class that we put on to discuss what our program looks like, all the nuances and requirements, that way that they understand what they're being told to do when they come to test the device, and they can test it fully functional based on our program. We also work with building code enforcement to do plan review. The plan review is for upfits, for new construction when in regards to an industry or commercial. Upon that review and approval, it goes back to the building code enforcement to finish their permitting process. So we're in that line, that chain of approvals. We go through and educate the public on this program through various websites, through brochures, through different avenues, working with the communications team of the county to truly explain what this is and encourage and nudge compliance. That's what we want to do here. We don't want to force people in the corner. We want to encourage the compliance. We feel like we can get much better cooperation that way than being too forceful. We want to educate rather than enforce entirely. Now, saying that, here's some enforcement elements. There's always going to be some of those that are just going to be non-compliant. They're going to be hard to deal with, and we have to set up steps in order to focus on that. But the biggest point to this slide is that the first offense is an NOD. We do not want to go into assessing civil penalties, but they have to be there for those that just flat refuse to comply. So the first offense would be a notice, and we'd work with them to get that device operational and functional. However, if it doesn't work, we assess civil penalties for our enforcement response plan. And if it comes down to it and it's an imminent hazard to the water system, it could go to severing the water connection immediately. So in the process, customers are notified based on the situation at hand, if it's a correction to their current device or if it's required to be installed. They get a certain period of time to fix that. And we'll have dialogue with them and conversations in that time frame to make sure that we stay in touch with them and they understand and they're not held to this once they get to the point where they feel like they've got to take care of. They have an opportunity to appeal if they feel that they've been wrongly issued a violation. So the tier of civil penalties on this slide is from our enforcement response plan that goes along with the program. Again, it first starts with a notice of deficiency, and that's where we want to stay. We wanted to educate and nudge compliance instead of having to assess these penalties. One main reason is that nobody likes to have to pay for violations. It's administrative, can be consuming, time consuming if we can get them to comply immediately on a deficiency. And this is a slide to compare our enforcement penalties to other utilities that are running the same programs. As you can see in comparison, they run pretty similar to one another on how they issue theirs out. And the next component would be program recovery through fees. So this would go to the Board of Governors for consideration in the future prior to the ordinance updates, but here is a program fee to do full cost recovery for the program. That way it's not spread out amongst those that don't have to comply. That compared to other utilities that are doing the same program, again, they look sort of similar. We're not doing anything much different than what those are that have it already established as an enforceable program. Okay, so what's next? So again, there's no action for the board to consider tonight. This is information only. However, in subsequent meetings, there will be some things that come to you for consideration as ordinance updates for this program. First of all, being the adoption of program fees. consideration of the ordinance adoption by the Board of County Commissioners, and a target date of the September 1st, 2022 implementation of the program. And I think I may have breezed through that pretty quickly, but is there any questions that you may have?
Commissioner Russia?
I apologize, not on my A game, but, so I build a neighborhood and I build a house in the neighborhood, and this check, is there a check valve that's on my side or the county side?
It's on the homeowner side. It'll be on your side.
Okay, so when I pay for it, is there a way to put it on the county side?
No, sir.
I mean, if I pay a fee to the county for a tap fee, if you're saying that we're gonna tack on an inspection fee every year for every house in the county?
It won't be for residential. The inspection fees, commercial, or non-residential industrial, where we have to go in.
So this is industrial only, it's not residential?
Well, no, the program applies to residential with irrigation meters. However, the inspection fee applies to commercial and industrial when we go in and have to look through the facility and understand what their devices look like and what material they're handling inside the facility.
Okay, so this is not going out to every yard in every neighborhood and checking to see if there's anything flowing back in?
No, the program applies to those residents with irrigation, whether it's a separate meter or a meter combined with the domestic, and anything larger than 1 inch, which is mostly considered commercial and non-residential. However, to your point, the inspection fee, we're not going to go into a house and look around and charge these people an inspection fee.
Okay,
This is for those commercial industries that we have to go out, we have to hunt, we have to search, we have to do our
right.
homework when we go into the
So like a couple years ago, we had a mouse in a water spigot. That's what we're talking about, right? We're looking for the mouse in the water spigot.
Sure.
To some degree.
Yeah, to some degree, that would make some sense.
Yeah, worm climbs in the irrigation, and then the water goes down and the worm rots. And
I get, in
Yeah.
most simplest terms, yeah, it's really
listen, I'm on simple terms today. Okay?
I understand.
I'm on simple terms.
It's
so-
mostly like if somebody is
But if we had
washing
a-
their car and
Yeah.
they have the hose in the bucket with the soap,
Yeah,
system pressure fails in the system, it pulls the
Siphons.
suds into the system. That's the basic
Yeah.
premise.
I do want to clarify something. So I know you're talking about inspection fee, and that's the inspection fee that Josh showed. That's our inspection fee. I do want to point out that the program would require those individuals who have an irrigation meter or are on a 1 meter that also serves irrigation. They have to have a third party give us an annual report that that device is operating. We're not performing that inspection. We're not charging that charge, but per the program, those property owners are required to give us an annual report that that device is operational and working correctly. So I didn't want you to miss that point. While we're not charging them an inspection fee, there is a charge that those homeowners are going to have to bear because that device is their device. It's not our device. So I didn't want you to miss that.
I didn't think I missed it. But so what are
I
we
may
talking,
not
how
be
much
clear.
money is that gonna cost?
So they can negotiate that with the tester themselves, but the range is 175 to 275, I believe, in that slide.
So,
It's in that range because, we can't guarantee what a tester would charge, but they can also negotiate that with the tester they
how many
choose.
do we have like that?
It'll be in the thousands because some developments have all front yards irrigated.
And the more testers we get, the more options each homeowner would have to choose and find the best price. None of that comes to us.
Commissioner Rushing, on the one thing I will say, I hadn't ever really thought about it, but an irrigation head, when it goes back down in its receptacle, it's like an open wound. And if that check valve does not go shut, dirty water can go down in that pipe. And if it's if for some reason we have a pressure drop, it could dump that water in the system back into the main system.
That's correct.
Would it be a good idea for us to put the check valve on our side from now on?
We'd be on our side, on the
Yeah.
county side. We have a dual check valve system that's on the back side of our meter sets that protects for most events like that. However, irrigation is considered a different hazard class, which means that based on rule, they'd have to have a different type of device.
Okay, I guess
Installed on there.
I'm confused again. So we have a check valve on our side
Mhm.
to prevent it from going to the neighbor's house. It could still go back to your house, but we got something to prevent it from going back in our system on our side.
It's a different hazard class. It only allows, there's different hazard classes for different devices that'll protect to a certain extent. So a high hazard, that's considered with like private wells and boilers and waste systems and irrigation, that requires a higher level of protection beyond the minimum dual check valves that we put in the system that protects from a low hazard to get back into the water. This program better defines that under requirements.
I guess I'm wondering how we're dependent on our neighbor to protect us. We're not dependent on the county to protect us. And I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know that that's very smart.
We're dependent on a neighbor to do what?
Protect us, like, for example, if I don't have mine inspected, my neighbor next to me could get contaminated, or is there a safety check that the county's providing to keep that from happening?
The program is the safety check. So if we understand that they have a irrigation system set up in your neighbor's house, they don't get their device tested annually as required through the program, we will go and approach that customer and have discussions with them and get that tested.
We've had to tear people's houses down for letting sewage run into the ditch. I mean, again, we surely have some kind of checks and balances with the county that we don't depend on our neighbor's goodwill to protect our water supply.
I think
Tell me yes.
I think the issue here is that the program is currently voluntary, and what we're asking the board to do in the future is to make it mandatory for us to be able to enforce it. So we don't have the ability at this point in time to disconnect or sever a property owner that has a non-functioning backflow preventer that is potentially causing contamination to our system.
But
We don't have that ability.
tell me that we have a backflow preventer on our side.
What I think Josh was telling you is that backflow preventer doesn't necessarily stop every type of contaminant. And so the issue is really boiled down to, if it is a high hazard, that check valve on our side is not going to catch that.
So this program solidifies that as a mandatory testing and inspection requirement. And then our routine water sampling procedures will continue doing the monitoring outside of that.
So, but we have we have our side, customer side. What you're asking us for is to put testing requirements on the customer side. What are our requirements?
So our requirements are based on engineering design standards from the state to issue permits to operate the water system. It's following that criteria, the engineering criteria, on the requirement for the type of devices.
So we have a yearly inspection on our side.
On our backflow devices, yes.
So we are doing a yearly inspection.
Yeah, there's 75 devices that are county-owned that are in libraries and jails, the lift station.
No. Every house. I mean, you're requiring every house. Does every house have a backflow preventer?
Every house has a dual check valve or a single check valve behind the water meter.
And
Those are non-testable though, unfortunately,
on our
for this
side,
program,
on our side. But
which are following the design standards for water systems. This program, what we're asking you to do is consider adoption for testing and inspection of devices that are installed in irrigation systems or those that are not installed, having an ability to get them installed and then continue the testing.
Forcing the customer to install them
Through the requirements,
and then have a yearly
inspections.
fee inspection.
Yes, sir.
Oof.
Josh, I might add one thing that we didn't touch on a while ago. If they don't have irrigation, this will not be required.
That is correct.
If they're irrigating off of a spigot, it won't be required.
That's correct.
This is only for installed systems. And I was just sitting here thinking, when they spread bug spray,
Yes.
bug-
Pesticides, herbicides.
herbicides, fertilizer, all those things, if you go to a irrigate, I had never even thought about it, but all that stuff could go back in there.
I think that as Commissioner Rushing was pointing out, his concern, I believe, is that, you know, if we have check valves, why is that necessary? And the issue is that our check valves aren't going to catch those things. They're not designed to catch high hazard items. So that is why we're asking the board in the future to consider making this a part of a mandatory program, because understand that if you are placing fertilizer, herbicide, pesticides on your property, you are potentially causing a hazard to your neighbors. So you should be responsible for that hazard that you could be creating. That is the logic here.
And another thing that the county is gonna have to cover, what was that y'all told us about a month ago, where we're gonna have to,
That's the lead rules.
we're gonna have to bear all the expense of any pipe going into the house.
At this point in time, we have to evaluate all those on the lead rules, where that exists, and we may very well be responsible for replacing that as far as service lines. Yes, sir.
And unfortunately, I think what Josh is talking about is just running right in front of being mandated to do it.
Right. Anytime we have regulations that get established, and we don't take the opportunity that we have available to comply with those regulations, it can eventually become mandated where we don't have an option to develop the program we have to follow certain models. At this point, we have the opportunity to get into compliance with the state rule, which follows the EPA rule, before being mandated to something that may be more expensive or more difficult to manage.
Commissioner Simpson.
Clarifications I should mention. So on the lead and copper, technically the homeowner is.
Get closer to the microphone.
Oh, sorry. So a couple clarifications. Technically, with the lead and copper rule, the homeowner is responsible for their service line for replacing that. We don't know what that looks like yet, and there may be subsequent conversations over policy issues on how we handle that. So that's one point. To Commissioner Rushing's point, I think the discussion is, Josh was mentioning that, there's a double check at the meter, and Mr. Matthews mentioned that wasn't sufficient protection. There's fundamentally two different types of devices. There's, for higher protection, you want to reduce type device. So that is a testable device, and if you have an irrigation system, then you have to use that device for that irrigation system so it can be tested. And that is an owner's responsibility.
Well, let Commissioner Simpson.
Excuse me, my question was, on our side of the meter, are there check devices that meet the high hazard standard?
On county-owned devices,
On
such as
our side, yeah, as opposed to the customer side.
What he's talking about is in front of every house. He's not talking about our devices, but he's talking about in front of every home where there's potentially a double check of
Understood.
dash has.
Yeah, those are not considered high hazard devices.
But are there,
There are devices, and they are there to prevent some contaminants to get through, but they're very low hazard built, and they don't react to certain different pressure drops in the system. A reduced pressure zone assembly actually is built in a way to where each disc operates with a different pressure. And so when those discs shut, if that water's contaminated, it evacuates out the bottom of that reduced pressure zone and, on the ground. It doesn't get into the system as like a physical disconnect.
I was just thinking logically that as we move forward on new construction, if there was a device that could do that, then we could look in that direction, but obviously that's not feasible, as I understand what you just said.
The current installation of devices do follow the state's criteria for water systems based on engineering design.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rushing.
So if, so I don't have a irrigation meter, but if I did, what I would do is instead of paying $200 a year inspection fees, I would have that cut off and I would irrigate from my tap on the house, from the outside spigot. Any problem with that? I could do that, no inspections, my drinking water's safe.
That's correct.
So I could just eliminate the irrigation meter and use, and redo it off the tap on the spigot on the house.
Two things to add to that. One, it's not as convenient as it would be to have all the little zones and irrigation system across the yard. But that's a choice that can be made. The other is, if I'm not mistaken, it goes through the domestic meter into the house, use the water hose to irrigate your yard. That's not just an irrigation-only rate. That also includes a sewer rate going through the domestic
Right.
meter.
Right, so it could raise the sewer bill, but.
Right, they would see an increase in their
And
sewer rate.
And keep in mind that, per the state building code, anyone who has an irrigation system now has to have a separate meter and a backflow preventer. That's actually required. So since 2009, I believe, is when that went into effect. So we've got past properties that they don't operate that way. They have one meter and they're irrigating from that one meter. And that's what we don't necessarily have 100% data on, how many people that, or how many homes are like that.
Do some neighborhoods irrigate the whole neighborhood? Like, do some subdivisions have one irrigation meter for the whole neighborhood?
No.
I'm not sure about that, Commissioner Rowe. I'm not sure.
Okay, so it wouldn't be like for example, a neighborhood who maybe catered to elderly, or had small lots, they may have, like, they do all the.
It could be.
Landscaping
I
and.
couldn't say it exists. It could be.
Yeah,
There may even be situations where HOAs have their irrigation throughout common areas, maybe not individual homes or yards.
okay.
Commissioner
Yeah,
Rushing, I would tell you, I've had to install several backflow preventers as I had properties that water lines went by. And there's about 5 different prices of backflow preventers when you go to Lowe's or Hughes Supply. I mean, you can buy one for about $65, and I imagine the one that gives you the high level protection is in the $200 to $300 range.
Possible. It has more moving parts, more opportunities to eliminate a high hazard than the lower ones.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Josh, could you go back to that slide that summarizes the administrative code and other legal authorities?
Most certainly.
And just, you can give me just a minute here.
This presentation is also in your packet, your briefing packet,
Okay.
to refer back to, if you'd like to look into some of the questions or options or requirements.
And part of
Thank
the purpose here is to again give you information and let you then, as you're doing, give us feedback before we actually bring you an ordinance for you to adopt. So again, if there are things that you want us to look at and do differently, or questions, that's the whole purpose behind this, information only.
Yep. Thank you.
That was a little bee's nest, wasn't it?
Andy, water sampling throughout the system happens every day. How many samples generally per month. And Commissioner Rushing talked about the little mouse. That's how the little mouse was found, was doing these random samplings. But how many of those take place in the system on a monthly basis? And that ensures that if we have a situation that occurs in the county, that we know about it as quickly as possible.
Yes, so we take approximately 120 samples a month in the water system. It's not necessarily on a daily basis, but over the course of the month, we'll take those samples. Those are bacteriological samples, so that's to indicate any kind of pathogen that may be in the water system that we need to attend to and make adjustments for in the system. So I believe that's what you're doing.
Any other questions? If not, we'll move on.
Thank you.
To the industrial pretreatment program and sewer use ordinance presentation.
Thank you again. You're stuck with me for one more presentation, then we'll end the night. So a lot of this same logic applies when we talk about industrial pretreatment and the sewer use ordinance. This is highly regulatory driven. It is to protect the system integrity, and it's also to protect the environment on the discharge sides of the treatment plant. So what we're looking at is understanding the material or the items, the stuff that's in the wastewater as it gets through the collection system to the plant and as it leaves the plant, trying to prevent a pass-through for any pollutants that go through it. So similar to the cross-connection presentation, we'll do a quick overview of what the current sewer use ordinance is, those requirements that drive us to where we're at to talk about it today, updates, current program overview on status. We'll visit the fat, oils, and grease program, and then we'll go into what's next on the requested action moving forward. So with the sewer use ordinance, in a nutshell, it's there to protect the system from any pollutants or metals that may discharge into the system causing problems in the plant. So it regulates, it establishes certain programs and sets limits for those pollutants. And I guess most importantly, it gives us the authority to enforce when it comes to understanding what these pollutants are, and if they're harmful to the plant, we can do something about it. So why are we updating now? Andy mentioned that the sewer use ordinance has not seen any significant updates to it since 1994. NCDEQ recommends we revisit every 5 years. This is our opportunity to look at the state and federal model that they've introduced to us lately, mirror that into a new ordinance that we can stand on for the next 5 years upon review before we have to come back and look at it again. It's also an issue because at this point in time, we as UC Water do not have control authority over the industries and the commercial non-residential use. The state has that authority at this point. We get through this presentation. Later, you'll get the ordinance request in subsequent meetings. Once you do that, there's some other components that go along with it. If the state approves the program as it's written, then we would get the control authority and be able to regulate this program as it stands. Right now, if we have a concern, we've got to call the state. The state comes out and does the inspections and the authority. The requirements for this program under sewer use ordinance is the Clean Water Act, and we are required under state permit specifically for 12 Mile to establish a pretreatment program. It's currently already underway in Crooked Creek. We just don't have that authority to control if there's issues with it, if there's violations to a certain extent. So a few of the updates to the proposed ordinance. Again, the most important piece of that is delegating that authority to us from the state so that we can go in and do inspections, we can understand what those pollutants are, and we can permit and regulate how that gets to the plant based on sampling and inspections. Establishment of an ERP, enforcement response plan. It aligns with the current organizational structure that we're set up now. And then it goes into expanded definitions of the FOG program and what a user is based on significant industrial user or industrial user. As I mentioned earlier, the components to an approved program through NCDEQ is doing industrial waste surveys, which we have to all the industries that are in our system at the moment. As we'll see in the slides coming up, out of those 55, only 2 have been permitted as industrial users. And I'll explain more of that in a few minutes. And then we also have to do a headworks analysis, long-term and short-term monitoring plans, establish an ERP, which all those components are complete at this point. And then after providing this to the board in consideration to adopt the ordinance is the last step under some signature authority going to the state for them to approve the program, and when we can begin to administer and manage it. NCDEQ has done an unofficial review of our documents so that we can kind of streamline the process in the event that that you've considered it for adoption. So what is a SIU versus a IU? Significant industrial user in the ordinance is better defined than it was in the previous ordinance with these updates. There's a few elements to what would be a significant industrial user versus industrial user. There's more for significant because there's more hazard available. There's an opportunity for more adverse effects. And then an industrial user would be those that have the discharge that may have a reasonable potential to adversely affect the treatment works. And in saying that, the 2 examples that we have currently in our system are Kiwo Metals and Atrium Union West Stallings. They're permitted under the current sewer use ordinance. It's basically Kiwo Metals has elevated metals in their discharge. We're working with them to do sampling. We're working with them to install some pretreatment components in their system so that when it gets to us, we understand what that looks like, what that wastewater discharge is, and it's within current limits. Atrium Union West, similar situation. They're permitted based on their request to discharge into a decon tank in order for discharge to settle out, take analytical results or samples, see what those results are, and then we would accept it once it falls within the acceptable limits of the ordinance. So there's industries that are affected. We went over 2 of the 55 that have been surveyed. As more industries come in, we'll be asking for those surveys to be completed so we can understand what processes they're using, what manufacturing, what are they warehousing, things like that, and then we'll move forward with permitting as necessary if required. It also applies to dental users under a new rule. We currently have 45 of those in the system. It's a dental amalgam rule based on their discharge and mercury levels. And then as they come in, we'll establish those any new resident or any new industries. Moving into the fat, soil, and grease program, grease is one of the leading causes for sanitary sewer overflows in most sewer systems, collection systems. It's required under Division 2 of our sewer use ordinance. For the update, we've had to implement these components to a program based on the collection system permitting that happened back in 2013. So we've been working under this program for a while under to handle our FOG discharges. Each grease trap service is required to obtain a hauling permit from DEQ, as well as go through an orientation class similar to cross-connection control to understand our requirements under the FOG program, and we would permit them as well, and get results from their sampling and manifest to make sure they're taking what they're supposed to be taking and discharging it in a place they're supposed to be discharging. In that FOG program, it's food service establishments fall into that. So it's anybody primarily engaged in preparing, serving, or otherwise making food available for consumption. Currently, there's 390 in our system. That's a reduction from when it was when we originally did this presentation. And it ebbs and flows day to day. And we inspect those annually at a minimum. to ensure that their traps and devices are functioning properly.
Does that include City of Monroe as well?
City of Monroe has their own pretreatment program and their own fat soil and grease program.
This is just Union County.
That's correct. And another element is enforcement response plan. It is designed to provide a fair and non-based enforcement action if necessary. It's a guidance document governed by the sewer use ordinance. And it's established with tiers. So you've got the first thing that we want to do, as we did with cross-niche control, is work towards compliance. We issue NODs, notice of violations as well, so that we don't want to go to the civil penalty process. So the civil penalty is there as a deterrent to encourage compliance, to eliminate non-compliance, continue non-compliance, and it can go up to 25,000 per day per violation. Under that ERP, there's the tiers that we would follow based on the severity of the issue. Again, they get two opportunities to work with us and us work with them to get back into compliance, and that can be extended based on what the situation holds at that time. We don't have to go from Tier 1, Tier 2 straight to Tier 3 if we are having a good working relationship to get those devices under control. However, if it becomes a big issue, if it becomes something that is adversely affecting the environment, public health, or the health of the treatment plant, we can jump to somewhere in these tiers. Also, we do educational outreach. Currently, we at sanitary sewer overflows, we'll send emails out. We'll post signs at a neighborhood if something happened in that area, encouraging folks to take better control of their fat, soils, and grease disposal. We have pamphlets and brochures that go out, stuff on the website. Social media has quarterly blasts out to make folks aware of what's going on with fat, soils, and grease. Okay, in regards to financial impact for this program, there's no fees anticipated. It's going to be collected through non-residential and industrial wastewater rates as they currently stand. However, it is worth mentioning that in the case where we have a high-strength waste stream coming in, that costs more to treat because of different processes we have to use. So in order to recover that cost, there may be a request in the future as necessary for any surcharge that may need to be applied for those that exceed a permit limit as a significant industrial user in order to offset those high treatment costs. That would come back to the Board of Governors for the district at that time. That's not a consideration that we're asking for at this moment. Just want to put that out there for any future discussion if that comes up. But as a future need, we'll handle that as it comes. And then, so we're going to wrap up with what's next. So the consideration of the ordinance adoption from the Board of County Commissioners will be asked for in subsequent meetings upon your feedback and review of what we've currently presented to you and any corrections or items addressed. If adopted, we submit the sewer use ordinance to the NCDEQ for their approval. Once they approve it, we receive the control authority delegation, and then we're looking at another target date, same as cross-connect control, as September the 1st of 2022. Now, that implementation date may slide one way or the other based on how quickly we get a response from the state. So with that, are there any questions?
Josh, thank you very much. Very professional presentation. Manager Watson told me this was your first time, but I'm sure it won't be your last. You nailed it.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. All right. Thank you.
County manager comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of notes. you all are aware that we've had some really bad storms to blow through the county at the end of last week. And I just want to give a shout out to our 911 telecommunication teams and how they responded to all of those circumstances that were coming at them at a very quick pace last week. Y'all are aware that one evening we had a 50-acre wheat field fire that spread rapidly and required a number of fire departments to respond, along with North Carolina Forest Service and Union County Emergency Management. Ended up being well over 100 acres before it was all said and done with. And we had one telecommunicator that was coordinating all of those efforts on 2 different fire channels all at the same time. And she did a remarkable job, and we're very proud of that team. As it turns out, the very next evening, we had a very strong thunderstorm system that blew through the county. And by the time I left here at 5:30 and I got home an hour later, I had a couple of stops to make. I got home an hour later, there were every fire channel, dispatch channel in this county was in use. And I believe there are 12 different channels that can be used simultaneously all at the same time, and every one of them was being used. We had power lines down all over the western part of the county. There were multiple fire outbreaks, etc. And again, our staff did a remarkable job just keeping up with all of that traffic. But it required 2 dispatchers to get on and get on those channels and split up the number of calls to make sure that everything happened as it was supposed to, keep all of our volunteers and our paid staff safe while they're out there protecting us. And I tell you, I couldn't be any more prouder of them, and I just wanted to give a shout out to all those folks. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Manager, did the Watson Weather Service declare any tornadoes or?
There was reported tornado-like activity in the most southern part of the county, but it was unconfirmed officially. I don't know what else to say. I believe we did have some pretty heavy storm activity down there, as witnessed personally by some of our.
As everyone knows, I like a good laugh, and Commissioner Simpson had a lot of wind. Well, first he had a hailstorm that almost created a cow stampede, and then I told him Mark said there was no tornadoes, and Jerry's a lot more talkative when he's not sitting up here. He said, well, I rode down the road, and he ought to come down here at the edge of South Carolina. These trees twisted in circles everywhere. So we have a good time. Commissioner Simpson, comments?
Just in defense of the manager, it doesn't matter if there's any twist in motion or if the barn blowed over, it really don't matter, does it, Mark, whether it's a tornado or not, so.
Well, that's not exactly what you told me when you said, tell him to drive down here and look at these trees.
I just say enough secret.
Thank you, Commissioner Simpson, for getting me out of that.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners for allowing me to participate from a hospital room last week in the meeting, and thank everyone for the thoughts and the prayers, and hopefully it'll be at 100% real soon, just trying to recoup, and again, thank everyone for their thoughts and prayers.
Commissioner Helms.
No comment.
Vice Chairman Williams.
No comments, Mr. Chairman.
Well, once again, Josh, good job. I have really never met you where I knew who, I've probably met you in the hallways, but it was very good presentation. We got John Shutak talking loud. Now we got to work on Andy again now. Okay, need to make a motion to go into closed session. Let me get to my exact wording. I'm sorry. I was playing instead of working. Make a motion to move that the board go into closed session in accordance with General Statute 143-318-11A3 to consult with an attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.